We begin our study of U.S. history by looking at the collision of three worlds who come together on the North American continent. Those are going to be Native Americans, Europeans, and Africans. What we will look at today is how did this happen? What were the factors that led to this creation of a brand new world? We begin by looking at Native Americans and asking the question, how did they arrive in North America? What most historians have agreed on is that they must have walked across a land bridge that was formed that connected Russia to North America during the last ice age. And literally, they walked across this ice bridge, this land bridge, that's going to connect those two continents following their food source. Most early Native Americans were hunters and gatherers. They would hunt for their food while the women would go around and gather the food that they could use to eat. So this is going to be the way that their society was set up, with the men being your hunters and your women being the gatherers. Once agricultural develops, it's going to be key for civilization. Because now, instead of having to move around from place to place on a regular basis, these Native Americans could now plant crops and stay in one location until they were harvested. This is going to be huge because it's going to allow for permanent settlement. This development is going to allow for ancient civilizations to develop. And we talk about civilizations, and these were very complex societies. They were all really good at adapting to their environments. They used whatever type of resources were around them to create their homes, for the food sources, and for anything else that they needed to survive. Almost all Native Americans had a very close relationship to the land because it was the land that they were able to survive on a regular basis. They also had one key thing that made them very different from most Europeans, and that they believed in the communal ownership of land. This means instead of there being private ownership of land, the land that they had was for the entire tribe's use. They also believed in a universal spirit instead of Christianity and the idea of one God. That's going to be key as well. And they had tribal communities. Many of these tribes will clash and they will go to war against each other over time. This is going to be one of the problems that Native Americans have when they attempted to fight against the Europeans that were entering their land. In Western Africa, you're going to have also very major societies and civilizations already established. These big kingdoms were going to be based on trade across the Sahara Desert, and they already had established trade relationships with Europeans. And Songhai, Benin, and the Congo are going to be three of the major ones. Now, one of the things to remember is that Africa already had slavery. However, this was a very different type of slavery from what we began to know in North America that was developed by Europeans. These slaves were used as who were usually prisoners of war, were then traded for other goods and services. The type of slavery that existed in Africa was also not passed down from generation to generation. That also makes the slavery began in North America very different and much more cruel. Europeans had already began exploring, but it really didn't start with just for exploration's sake. It began with the Crusades and an attempt to try to go retake the Holy Land in Jerusalem. So they began to go to the Middle East in order to find better routes. They began exploring those areas, and then they come across these products and spices and all types of different goods that they felt they just really couldn't live without. That is going to lead them to look for faster and better trade routes. The Renaissance, which is going to be this rebirth of art, literature, and scientific thought, is also going to fuel this exploration period because we're going to have people thinking about and looking at new and better ways to do things. The Reformation is also going to be key in that it is going to begin a period of unrest within the church. Remember, the Reformation is going to be the separation of the Catholic Church. So it was no longer Catholic Church only. You have both Protestants and Catholics now, whereas before it was only Catholics. Protestants, remember, are going to include your denominations like Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, Episcopals. These are all going to be part of the Protestant denominations. This is going to lead to a lot of unrest in Europe and is going to lead various groups of people to leave and look for other places where they could more freely practice their religion. Commerce or trade is going to grow, and you begin to have groups of people who want to look for goods that they can't get that are very close to them. So they begin looking for better ways and faster ways to get those products that they wanted. You also see the development of nationalism. Nationalism is the pride in one's country.